Mr. Lee is going to give a talk about how to use AI to improve the lecture in the classroom. So let's give Mr. Lee a round of applause.
Okay, thank you, Professor Gao, for the warm introduction. Yeah, so I was just told about 5 minutes ago I'm supposed to speak English today, so that's fine. I'll try to, if I need to, or if any of you, sometimes I do tend to speak a little bit fast with English. So if there's anything that you need to clarify in Chinese, do stop me, and I will try to add some Chinese to us as well. Okay, so thank you for attending this semester's first session on the topic of EMI, and that's exactly what I'll be sharing with you guys today. And our topic today obviously is AI and EMI, and how do we utilize this technology to help facilitate not only transforming your current curriculum or your class into EMI ready using AI technologies, AI tools, and so forth. And I'm going to be sharing with you guys, whether it be from my past experience or some of the stuff that I'm currently doing right now in terms of in the field of education. So before I begin, my name is Chien. Chien Lee, you can call me Chien. 中文是李健群，健康的健，维群的群。And I'm currently the founder and chief scientist at Spark Amplified, the company that I founded about 7 years ago in Silicon Valley. And so before I begin, I was actually just here not too long ago, about maybe 2 months ago or so, towards the end of last semester. And in that lecture, I was, actually sharing with a lot of the folks regarding, AI in terms of its usage in education. I just want to understand how many people actually attended that in today's session, so I know how much I need to, skip if I've already talked about this. Okay, so only you see what everyone else is new. That's fine. That's good. Yeah, because I just want to make sure, how many attended that, so I want to make sure my material don't overlap as much. But since this is all new information for you all, so I'm just gonna, share as much as I can. Okay. But anyway, so that was a great session, and to be honest, it was actually I had to thank this session, which ultimately led to this session. Where I actually got to talk with CY and see how we can actually dedicate a session purely on EMI. Okay, so it was that. Okay, and a brief background of myself. Like I said, I'm a founder of Spark Amplify, the company that I started. I'm also currently heavily interested in education. So I've also founded a new development in what we call Resphere. I'm currently the founder as well as the lead AI researcher on this thing that we're currently trying to reimagine the way we read with AI. Okay, and I'll share with you a specific case study on that we're currently will be working with one of the universities here in Taiwan as well. But anyway, like what CY was saying, I'm currently actually doing my PhD as well at Chien Lee University. Okay, and so today, what I'm going to be sharing, is I like theory, but I also like more practical stuff as well, right? And hopefully today's session, hopefully you guys will have a lot of the key takeaways that you can actually go back and start using. Okay, that I think sometimes is very critical, in terms of these workshops. Not too high level, not too theoretical, but more practical. So this way, hopefully we can, be able to apply some of those subsidies that CY mentioned. And so that's theory. Okay, so I'm not going to teach you about AI today. I'm going to teach you about how to use AI to facilitate or help you with your EMI transformation. And what's quite interesting is that today I'm actually going to be sharing some of the stuff that I'll be presenting on Friday. So on Friday, there's going to be an EMI international conference sponsored by Trinity College of London. And I was invited to actually be there as well as a presenter. In fact, the experience I will be sharing in that 40-minute talk is a specific class setting that I actually did just a couple months ago, 2 months ago in Thailand, in Chulalongkorn University, where I actually taught a group of non-engineering background students, MBA specifically, on use cases of AI in business. And so essentially, obviously, it's a English medium for instruction, and then I essentially designed the course based on some of the learning approaches that we not only learned in, let's say in TESOL teaching and so forth, but also utilizing EMI, some of these practices that we do in these type of settings. So I'll be sharing some of this as well. So even though if you're not going to be able to attend this, don't worry, I will maybe try to selectively point out some stuff that I will be mentioning at this conference as well. Okay. But if you can join us, make sure you join us as well. Okay. So today's agenda, to be honest, I could probably talk like, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours on this, but I know I don't have that much time today. I know I only have about an hour, close to 2 hours, maybe not. But there's a lot of things I want to share with you guys. First, obviously, depending on your understanding of AI, I want to make sure that we're all at the same level in understanding of what are some of the practical uses of AI right now. So I'm going to be sharing with you how in the workforce people are using AI. And then secondly, coming back as, in the educational application, how we can use generative AI to help us as educators or, for people that are working in the education field. And this is a topic that I actually recently I like to share a lot as well, in the sense of understanding its limitations. Yeah, I think that's pretty critical right now in the sense of now AI is at a point where everyone is already using it, and then furthermore, we are seeing its potentials. But however, at the same time, at that point in time, I think it's important to also pull back and understand its limitations and constraints as we move forward, so that we don't get ourselves into problem situations where maybe even biased information that are being created, or even privacy issues, right? So those are things that I also want to highlight today as well. So I'm going to say a lot of good stuff about AI, but I also want to make sure that we understand its limitations and some of its constraints. And this last component, I think, is going to be very, very hands-on and practical. I know some of you have brought your computers as well, so I'm not sure how much we'll actually be able to do with me, because since given the amount of time, we may not be able to step by step, but I'll show you in terms of screenshots, and then afterwards, I'll send you the slide that you can follow along if you need to. And then furthermore, if you really need something that's more hands-on, like what CY said, there are subsidies that you can probably think about how we can, I can help, in terms of helping guys put together classes that you guys are working on. Okay, so straight to the topic, future of work, right? I just want to get understanding. ChatGPT is something that's pretty common for all of us, right? Yeah, we all use it, right? And so AI, as we all know, is everywhere. In fact, sometimes when we think about AI, especially before, it's always these type of images that pop up in our minds, right? Because thanks to Hollywood movies, we have this negative connotation that AI is going to replace us. But in fact, I think AI is, like I said, it's everywhere. In fact, based on Elon Musk, it is going to be almost an integral part of our lives in the future, right? Whether it be the cars that you drive, those currently already possesses those type of capabilities, the mass communication, transportations, as well as even our close human-to-human interactions, right? These are all things that currently is, to some extent, is taking place. And I usually like to kickstart this talk by sharing with you a quote by Sam Altman, which, as you all know, is the founder of OpenAI. He said that AI is going to be a technological and societal revolution. That's the word that he uses. And when we give people better tools, okay, which is a key component today, which I'll be sharing with you many of the tools that you probably have not heard of that you can actually use for your EMI material planning. When we give them better tools, they can change the world, okay, which is essentially what hopefully, with these EMI courses, we're able to do. And then, of course, we'll be able to do more and create more, right? Because given as educators, I know we're always busy, especially, with CMI classes, you're already, busy with that already. So how can we squeeze more time in doing EMI classes, right? Considering that, that may not be your native language. So we have to utilize AI to be able to allow us to do more things at a specific set amount of time. And so essentially all of you are going to be possessing superpowers, like what he says before, right? Superpowers on demand with these tools that we'll be sharing. Okay, use cases, I'm pretty sure you guys all know, right? Text, image, video, audio. These are all things that currently is everywhere. It's around us. Generative AI is here to stay. In fact, I'm not sure if you guys follow ChatGPT and its evolution, but a lot of things are going on. In the past, these type of developments maybe would take a couple of years to see, but now it's not years, but potentially months or even weeks, right? So these things are essentially unfolding right in front of us. Whether it be, what now we're very used to using the 4.0 or even the 0.1, where it has the human reasonability, and even how ChatGPT wants to essentially disrupt the way we search, right? So these are all things that are currently happening right in front of us. And search-wise, I think I want to, and then furthermore, 0.1, I'm not sure if you guys, how many of you have used 0.1? OpenAI's 0.1 with the reasoning model? No? Okay, if not, you should try it, right? Because the 0.1 is what they call, it provides a chain of thought, which essentially, for the first time, you're able to actually see what AI is or ChatGPT is thinking. Like, how is it reasoning your questioning, right? It would say, okay, so let's say if you give it a question of, please create a market analysis for a specific company or a specific project, it would actually reason and tell you what it's thinking. Like, how would it do this, right? It would first, break down into, potential, let's say, market entry analysis. It would then maybe pull some statistical data. So it would actually lay out its reasoning. Essentially what we do, as humans, when we are given a task, we usually look at it from a perspective of, okay, in order for me to achieve that task, or that objective, what are some of the individual tasks do I need to undertake, right? So to some extent, it is aligning to us in the sense of the human values and principles. And so if you do get a chance, do take a look at that. And so because that's something that's really important, because as you all know, right, AI sometimes people think it's a black box, so we don't really know what it's thinking. To some extent, we still don't know. But this is one step forward in the sense of trying to uncover or, make that box a little bit more transparent. And then furthermore, they did some analysis, in the past with the 4.0, it's really good for language, and that's why it's called large language models. But in terms of some of the technical capabilities, like answering math questions and things of that nature, sometimes it would still fail on those efforts. But with OpenAI 0.1, those type of, like for example, math-related questions, it actually has improved by a lot. In fact, they did some studies where you compare 4.0 with 0.1 based on the International Mathematics Olympiad. 0.1 actually gets, these questions correct most of the time, 80% of the time. And so essentially 0.1 is at the level of, let's say, of a PhD student. Okay. So it is, getting there. And in the search, I just want to quickly share with you. I mean, obviously today we're talking about education, right? But I want to share some of this quickly just for like 10 minutes or so, because I think these are all things that are going to be, around us. And AI is not just going to be used for a specific domain, but it is actually going to be a part of our lives. And so some of the things that I mentioned, I think those are all things that we should be aware of. And then furthermore, even the search process, right? So imagine a couple of years ago, before ChatGPT, right, our default setting on our Chrome page was probably the Google page, right? Which a lot of you still set that as the default page. But to be honest, I think right now we're at a point where, an inflection point where potentially that might change. So, right, so in the past, Google, the way search process it works is where it's very keyword driven. You list out your questions and essentially based on the search and list out all the potential pages that are relevant to your keywords. And then furthermore, you are given the task of looking through those pages. And usually we only look through the first page or 2 page, whatever, and to find your own answer, right? So that was the original process, what, Google came up with, or, made a lot of money on. But now, with ChatGPT, it's trying to, change that in a sense. So instead of you looking for your answers, it is actually trying to give you the correct answer, at the beginning, right? So that is a big change. And so that's why, Google, they're, and a lot of these, they're all trying to update or revise their search experience now, right? Because they know that, the users are getting used to, not having to look for their answers, but also they're used to getting the answers, directly, right? So ChatGPT now, so when you ask something like, hey, where can I grab dinner at a specific location in the world on a specific night, it would just, give you specific answers, right? Or a couple answers. And so not only do they give you better answers, but they also understand, I think the source part of it is sort of that transparency, right? Because I think, we're still at a point where, not all of us completely agrees or believes in what ChatGPT gives you. So I think the source part of it still need to be applied. But I think as we move forward and as we use more ChatGPT and use more in our daily lives, I think that trust part becomes, I don't want to say given, but I think it will become more easily accepted. And then so in some of the talks that I do, not in the education field, but also in the business field, I also talk about, what is the future of SEO, right? In the future of SEO, it may not be SEO anymore. It actually might be generative engine optimization, GEOs, where we are shaping the way how these generative engines, these large language models, not only are they, the data that's trained on, but when users ask them questions, in this example, let's say if you were to ask ChatGPT, what are some of the things to do in New York, right? And currently right now, the engine might say, well, in the afternoon, escape the city's hustle and bustle by taking a leisurely stroll in the Central Park, which obviously is a must-go place in New York. And then, head to the iconic Statue of Liberty, which once again is another must-do activity in New York. And then lastly would be, let's say, try out the New York style pizza, right? Now, from a business perspective, let's say if you are a pizza, restaurant, you want to obviously make sure that people, when they go to New York, they have an opportunity to not only test, to try out the pizza, but potentially even go to your restaurant as well, right? So ultimately, the goal would be how can they reshape or provide the necessary content so that when these generative engines are training their large language model to be able to affect the results so that actually, instead of what is just said now, which was the previous response, change it to something where it would say, okay, start by tasting the city's famous New York style pizza to make sure that they actually will be able to enjoy this and maybe even go to your restaurant. Then go to these, sightseeing places, right? Hopefully be able to affect potential users or even consumers of your product, right? So that's how potentially, SEO down the road might be changed, instead of looking at these search results from Google search, but essentially looking at, how these search engines provide these answers. And so this is actually a paper by a couple of Princeton students. So if you're interested, let me know. I can share with you this paper. It's actually quite interesting. It teaches you how to actually do content creation as well, but in the age of GEO, but not SEO. Okay, so when we're talking about these different type of works with AI, it's changing, right? So in the past, I know today we have not only professors, educators, but we also have potentially teaching assistants as well as even administrative staff members, right? And so for those that are not teaching but are potentially playing other roles in this education capacity, we also need to think about where AI can help us with some of these mundane or maybe even administrative tasks. And so currently right now, from an organizational perspective, you are seeing AI being played out in a lot of these various business functions, whether it be the human resource, the finance, the R&D, marketing, and so on, right? And so I'm going to share with you 4 examples, okay, which, especially here in Taiwan, as a manufacturing hub in the world, we usually, in our business, we always talk about like manufacturing operation and quality, right? And so I'm going to use this quickly, and then so we can then get to the education, right? So like I mentioned before, right, with 4.0, we sort of crossed the gap where we can, instead of just using text, we can actually use multimodal graphics, images, videos, and so forth, right? And then various different type of formats. And so, so if we take a look at accounting, right? So every business needs an accounting. School has an accounting, right? And so when we're talking about accounting, you usually see something like this, where accountants are responsible to do financial analysis, with these different type of accounting statements. So in this situation, it's an income statement which is in a PDF, right? Very normal. And so if I'm able to utilize this and then, let's say, upload it into ChatGPT, and then I can actually have it and say, hey, pretend you're a CPA and give me a financial analysis of this income statement for that specific year. And actually, it does a pretty good job in this analysis, which not only provides the year-on-year, the comparisons in terms of net sales and all that stuff, but it actually gives you recommendations, which based on its large language model that is able to do. So this is something where I would, if I need to do this, I wouldn't be able to, because I'm obviously not a trained accountant, but I would pay a CPA in the US to do this. But now I can actually have, let's say, ChatGPT to run this information. Of course, I can't use this officially, but I can at least get an understanding of what are some of those potential areas for improvement. Okay, and then furthermore, in terms of like in the manufacturing industry, we always have quality. Right? Quality is essential, right? Especially here in Taiwan, we value quality. And so, in terms of quality, we always talk about how we can reduce, potential, let's say, occurrences of defects, right? So from a manufacturing perspective, this may be a Pareto chart which analyzes the various defects that actually happens during the manufacturing process. And this could, it could be like a diagram, which could be in a picture format, which is JPG. Now, so previously it was a PDF file, right? Which we all have in our computers. Pictures, diagrams is another thing that we all have in our computers, right? So let's see how ChatGPT, deals with images, right? Especially like diagrams like this. So when I input or upload this image into ChatGPT, and once again, I ask them, do you recognize this image? Because I need to make sure it recognizes it. So when I ask describe what you see in the image, it actually tells me, okay, what I see is a bar graph which consists of these different type of failures that happens during the manufacturing process, which essentially are these root causes. And then it tells you, these, it's a line, it's an axis graph and so forth. So first things first, it can understand, it can actually recognize this image, which is important, right? Once it can recognize it, I can then once again, in manufacturing, we always have like 八级报告, these type of reports that needs to be done, right? And nowadays, I think sometimes those are challenging because, for manufacturers now, sometimes, hiring is difficult, especially hiring people with experiences in, let's say, the quality, department or what, so those are sometimes require experiences to be accumulated. However, at the same time, when we are able to utilize, let's say, ChatGPT, not only recognizing a diagram, a quality Pareto, let's say, root cause diagram as a result, I can actually have it and say, hey, let's do a corrective analysis report, which essentially does a pretty good job, in terms of looking at introducing the situation and then also analyzing the failures, but also looking at some of the corrective actions that can actually be undertaken and so forth. And then keep in mind, as a business, obviously we have our past reports, we have things that can actually be used as references. And so with that process, this report would actually be a lot better, right? So this is not only trying to demonstrate that not only can ChatGPT help you with images, diagrams, it can actually do the necessary analysis. And then of course, with manufacturing, there's a lot of these type of sensors that you put on these, equipments that you have. And then furthermore, we always have Excel sheets laying around in our, computer, right? So that's something, I don't know if you guys have ever used it, but actually ChatGPT is quite good with Excel sheets as well. So you can actually upload an Excel sheet and with, let's say, numbers like this, and then have it recognize, what is in this Excel sheet. It would be able to recognize it. And then furthermore, if you're, sometimes we have to do charts, based on Excel sheets. Instead of you having to create that in Excel, you can actually do that in ChatGPT, okay? Which is actually, just one click away or one prompt away, right? And then of course, you can actually do statistical analysis. So if you're like me, you're not a statistical, stats major, that would be very helpful as well. Okay. And then lastly, I think, from a business perspective, I'm not sure if you guys, I know, like I said, there are administrative stats here. We're always looking at projects, right? There are projects that are being planned, being executed, and even being concluded, right? And so with projects, a lot of times it's about project management, right? Project management is really looking at these project schedules, Gantt charts, sprint charts, and so forth. Those are stuff that ChatGPT is actually quite good with as well. So let's say if you have a specific project schedule and you have situations like last year where we actually encountered a couple, typhoon holidays that we had to take into consideration. Those are things that can, we can actually let, input that in ChatGPT and says, hey, what if there's a typhoon coming into Taiwan and the project will be delayed by, let's say, a week, please give me optimized project schedules, not only one, but give me two, right? So it will then give you 2 plans and then you can adjust accordingly. Okay, so the reason why I wanted to spend some time on that is because I wanted to let you know, obviously we are in the educational industry. However, AI is actually affecting all industries, okay, whether it be manufacturing, whether it be things that we solve, accounting and so on. So those are all real life cases that actually my company, Smart Amplify, we actually work with businesses on it. Like how to utilize generative AI, how to utilize AI to actually increase productivity and efficiency. Because that's what we just saw, right? In the past, if you were to do those manufacturing quality reports, or if you were to do those type of analysis, it would actually require time as well as, the necessary people skill sets. But however, in this time, time, I think sometimes those are not always available, right? The right people may not be available. The amount of time that you need may not be available. And so how can we leverage or utilize generative AI tools like ChatGPT to be able to do some of these things that are very common in the workspace? And so what I'm trying to use this example to tell you is that not only is what you just saw is currently happening in the workplace, and then furthermore, what I'm about to show you guys this next hour or so will be applicable to, especially the educational segment. Okay, so that's sort of something that I want to just get you guys excited about because allowing you to be able to see what other industries are doing, and then be able to see how this can play out in the educational field. Okay, let me get some water. So usually we have a break, right? Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna. So maybe like a full hour. Okay, so we'll do a break around break. So let's get into the situation. Okay. Education, right? So this is what we're all here for. So I'm gonna dive into this. How can generative AI help us work smarter, right? That's the slogan for 2025, to be honest. So like we just said, I think AI is transforming across industries, okay? Whether it be fashion, gaming, healthcare, everywhere, right? Now let's take a closer look at how AI is affecting education. And this is a study by a AI application developer called SlideScope. They actually interviewed around 750 educators, trying to get some insights on their views of AI. And these are some results, right? 71% said, okay, teachers agree that AI is important, okay, to quality of their day-to-day work, right? Yeah, well, is improving the quality of their day-to-day work. Okay, so it's enhancing, in terms of efficiency, productivity. And then furthermore, teachers consider AI tools to be beneficial to education, which 70% agrees on that as well. And then furthermore, most of the teachers have started using generative AI tools. If not, after today's session, I think you guys will be. But in terms of statistics, at least 61% have used that over the past 3 months as well. And then, and ultimately, more than half says, the reason why we all use AI tools is really to save time, so that we can do more things, right? And so these are all some of the educators' view of AI. And then furthermore, those 750 individuals, they also asked, what are some of the things, that you use AI for in education? And then, so the top one was, to generate educational content. Okay. And so in today's session, I'm going to be sharing with you guys one tool where it's actually generating content as well. It's essentially, let's say if you currently are doing CMI, doing courses in Chinese, and so most likely your presentation is in Chinese as well. How can you maybe use a tool to help you translate that, right? And then get, that presentation slide. And so that sometimes is something that needs to start first, right? Because if you can't even get that into English, then, all the other stuff is way too early. So generating content, I think, is why we use AI for. And so that's one of the things that we'll be doing. Organizing a class or giving a lesson, getting inspiration for school assignments is third. Okay, yeah, so this is something that I'll be sharing with you guys as well. So in my presentation in the EMI conference, as you all know, EMI, obviously, when we think about EMI, is really just, teaching in another language. But when you're teaching in an English language, you also need to think about the students that are coming from, let's say, these various countries that potentially have a different way of learning things, right? And so essentially, sometimes even the class activities that you had before may need to be changed as well. And so today I'm going to be sharing with you from pedagogy perspective of, let's say, Bloom's taxonomy or even depth of knowledge, how we can actually use AI tools to be able to help us redesign some of these activities that we currently have to make it more engaging from a learner's approach. However, in an EMI setting, and so there are tools for that as well. So I'm going to be sharing with you all that. So those are going to be in this part where we're getting inspirations, right? We're getting potential, changes to how we actually engage with students in the past. Preparing a presentation for a project, so for improving text, automate administrative tasks. Okay, so this is another thing I'm going to be sharing with you today. So when we are doing EMI classes, I think once again, it's not just teaching in another language, not just redesigning our class activities, but the audience that we're engaging is different because obviously, with their English background. So with a different audience, we also need to think about how we can support these type of audience, right? Because obviously when they, just like with any students, they're going to have questions, right? They're going to come to office hours. They have questions regarding your class. They have questions regarding, to get opinions on certain things, right? Now, those are interactions that as an EMI instructor, you also need to play a role in. So we're not just delivering the class, but we also need to be able to, from a support perspective. And so today, so this was a discussion I had with CY. I told him I'm going to be teaching about this, and so this is something that we were excited about as well. So we're going to teach you how to create your own virtual teacher assistant or teaching assistant using MyGPT, right? Based on the class or information that you are teaching, right? Train the necessary model, and so that let's say your students, if they have any questions regarding, last week's lecture, or if they have any questions regarding, the upcoming exam and all that stuff, instead of asking, they can actually first ask your virtual teaching assistant that you have trained. So this is not just something that, they're just going to ChatGPT. It's actually trained based on your information, the information that you have provided. And so that it is to some extent, representing you to answer this question. And of course, if there are things that, that potentially needs a little bit more face-to-face, then we can get to the traditional path of office hours and so on. So the administrative task, that's something that we've added to today's component as well. So after today's session, all of you will be able to know how to train a virtual teaching assistant that represents your class or your curriculum, and then hopefully be able to ask you some questions. And I'll show you an example of how I use it in my class 2 months ago at Chien Lee. Okay. So we're all still on the same page, right? Okay. So these are the 3 things I'm going to be sharing today. And so essentially, based on the statistics that I showed, these are the 3 main objectives that we'll be doing, right? First, automate, right? So this is sort of the low-hanging fruit because it is actually trying to transform your current whatever materials that you have into an EMI ready situation, right? And so this is essentially piggyback on your material, but utilizing the right tool to be able to quickly get it into an English EMI ready material. Okay, so that's what I call automate. Okay, but it's not really fully automation. Okay, so there's still some manual process involved, but like I said, this is sort of the low-hanging fruit, right? And then the next part is what I just mentioned before, right? The enhancement part of it. So when we're teaching EMI, it's not just getting it into another language, it's not just delivering in another language, but we also need to start thinking about how we can enhance the engagement, right? Updating the class activities to enhance learning. And so that part of it is really going to be really focusing in on the pedagogies, on how we, to some extent, improve that engagement interaction. And then this third part is that support, which I talked about, essentially including that support. And the automation essentially is using your current material. Okay, so there shouldn't be an excuse on this because we all should have our current material, whether it be in Chinese or whatever, right? So the current material is already there. And then furthermore, what we're doing is we're using AI tools, specifically for that, the class or the topic that you're teaching, that domain-specific translation needs to play a part, and to be able to output that into materials that are EMI ready. And some of these materials, it's very diverse, right? These materials include your core syllabus, right? So this is the first week of class. The main thing that we usually do the first week is what? We go through our core syllabus, right? And so that's something that needs to be able to get it to EMI ready as well, right? So I'm going to be sharing with you like how I use, let's say, ChatGPT with a prompt design that can do this pretty well, okay? And then secondly, your class presentations, obviously, right? So your 16-week class presentations, whatever it is currently format is in, PDF, PPT, whatever, there will be a tool where it can actually allow you to do the translations and then also at the same time maintain the original layout and then furthermore the graphics. So it saves you a lot of time, right? So this is more on the efficiency side. And then, of course, I think there's other stuff as well, right, that can be translated as well. The homework assignments, examinations, things of that nature can be quickly done. But we're going to be focused on these two, for this session. Right. The second part is the enhancement. The enhancement part is this. Is really redesigning or reshaping your learning activities to follow these two. So if you're an educational buff, you probably have heard of these two terminologies, right? The Bloom's taxonomy, which is essentially the framework of the cognitive level, and then of course the depth of knowledge is how you essentially is model where you design your activities or analyzes how students really think about some of the assignments that you provide, right? And so when we're designing these activities, it should not only serve, because sometimes when we are designing these activities, we only think about probably on the lower level, right? Like how do you recall, do you reproduce, do you remember, right? But the actual learning process, we really need to think about how we can actually move up this, into a higher level of thinking, so that not only can they recall, not only can they understand, but they can also apply in a, let's say, a different scenario or a situation, and then have the capability to analyze. And then furthermore, ultimately, we want to be able to have students to be able to create, right, based on the knowledge that you have imparted, right? So this is, from a pedagogy perspective, that's something that, as instructors, as educators, that's something that we would love to be able to achieve, right? But in order to be able to achieve that, based on our current design, a lot of it is really just on the lower end. Can you recall what I just said? Can you reproduce? Can you remember? And so that's why a lot of the exams or quizzes that we provided is really looking at only aiming at this lower level. Now, however, like I said, if we are going to be aiming these, in an EMI setting to be able to attract foreign students, a lot of these, culturally, they grew up different than how us here in Taiwan, right? So culturally, they're from a different background. And so the way they learn potentially will be different as well, right? So instead of just focusing on, something we call and reproduce, how can we create our, let's say, activities, exercises, more targeted to the audience that we're trying to potentially, educate, right? And then furthermore, some of these tasks that we design, we also, from a depth of knowledge perspective, we're really looking at, like I said, the complexity of these tasks, right? Whether it be, like I said before, right? These topics are very similar. Doing taxonomy, DOK is very similar, but they're also the same thing. In this total level, it's really looking at how can I measure the recall, the reproduce. So, and then furthermore, how can we, let's say, build up applications, in terms of skills and concept, and more of strategic thinking, short-term, extended, and so forth, right? So these are all things that, from an educational perspective, you should think about. And like I said, we're not all educational backgrounds, right? And so how can we utilize AI tools to be able to close that gap, right? So even though you're not an educational background, you never studied education, you don't know about these pedagogies, but your ultimate objective is exactly the same as the person next to you, right? Because we want to be able to deliver a lecture in EMI setting to not only to be able to impart the information or the knowledge that you possess, but you wanted them to be able to not only learn this, but be able to apply this and create this. And so that, to some extent, will require some of these changes. But if you don't have that, it's fine, because that's where the AI tools can help you. And that's what I'm going to be able to show you. And then lastly is the support, right? So the support part of it, like I said, I think sometimes, I personally included this. I have never seen anyone done this before, right? But I think this is critical because, it's like this. Right now, with the 2030, bilingual policy, all the schools are being pushed through the environment, right? Yeah, you all understand this, right? So it's like an initiative that we all need to do. And so we're all pushing all of our educators to do this, right? But however, at the same time, doing it is potentially not that biggest problem. How can I support that, in a long-term perspective? Sometimes that's not being discussed. And so in this segment, with that virtual teaching assistant is why I think it's so important, because just like with any other students, they're going to have issues, they're going to have problems, right? And as originally, let's say if you're CMI instructors, now you got to do some more EMI, you're going to be facing with students that, not only are not speaking in your native language, furthermore, raised differently, with a different set of cultural background. So these are all things that you need to adjust as an educator and instructor, right? So it's not just, as easy as, hey, let's just get that into English. And so, however, in some of the things that we currently see that's being discussed in EMI, we don't really talk about the support part, because the support part, to be honest, can be really time consuming. So if we don't figure this out, then we're all just being pushed in one way, which potentially have potential, repercussions. So the support part is quite interesting, right? The support part, when I look at this, like I said, I created this based on my own experience, right? So when I look at the support part, what are some of the support parts that needs to be considered, right? Presentation delivery, right? How you present yourself is different. I'm obviously a native speaker, so for me, it's quite natural. And then furthermore, I'm always in a situation where I need to speak to the public, right? But not everyone is used to this, right? So how you deliver that presentation can affect how your students actually take in that knowledge, or if they do at all, right? So is there any way where we can actually enhance that, right? And with AI, yeah, there are tools. Today, we're not going to go into too much detail, but I'll just highlight on some of those. And also, like the assessment, evaluation, and feedback, right? Learning process is actually a two-way process, right? It shouldn't be the traditional way of me standing here just lecturing and then you taking that information. It's a feedback, it's a two-way process. And so as instructors or educators, we also need to think about how we can not only evaluate, but provide feedback, timely feedback to these students so that they can actually, help them, to learn the subject for subject comprehension, right? And so this sometimes can be quite complicated as well. Like how can we do, do the necessary assessment feedback, and then furthermore in their language as well, right? And then lastly, obviously, is the virtual teaching assistant, which I call it GPT, right? So how can we, in the past, if you think about it, this is just chatbot, right? But in the past, the chatbot is logical based. So if you wanted to do this in the past, it's not impossible, it's still possible, but you need to almost think about it from a logical perspective of what are some of all the questions that my students can ask you about. That's impossible. Yeah, there's no way you would be able to create that chatbot, right? But now, with LLMs, now it's possible. Okay, all you need to do is be able to provide more various information about your class. So in my situation, I would put my class presentation on there. I would do, because I have video recordings, I would put video recordings on it. I would have in the past, occasionally be interviewed on podcasts, audio stuff up there. I would be able to put in, like text. All this information is representative of me as an instructor. Then to some extent, I can, have the LLM be trained on this information. And so it would then be able to represent me to be able to help answer some of the questions that, let's say, my students have. Okay, so getting to that, so a couple of things, right? So the three things we talked about: presentation, delivery. So when we're talking about presentation delivery, it's really about the effectiveness of your speech, okay? And like I said, sometimes this is partially, you're born with it. Because some people just like to talk in front of the public, but sometimes, this can be trained as well, right? So there's a couple of things, we're looking at, let's say, the way language is used in terms of clarity, pronunciation, grammar, sentence structure, pacing, fluency. Those are all things that can affect, the delivery of, let's say, your presentation. And then furthermore, I think the speech itself, we're also looking at intonations, in terms of, when do I raise my volume, right? Maybe when a situation where it's important, where I want you guys to understand or to pay attention, or tone variations that I use during my speech. And then furthermore, areas where potentially a pause to highlight emphasis, right? So these are all things that, from a speech perspective, is important in terms of, delivery of your presentation. But like I said, this is not something that we're all born with or we've learned about. So what if there's a tool that can actually help you, right? Okay, so imagine this, right? So this tool is called Mockingbird. This is actually one of the few ones that I see that have like a fully component where you can actually play around with it. So, if you scan this QR code, we'll take a look at it. What it does is quite interesting. There's two options that it has to evaluate, improve on this. One obviously is, Mockingbird is sort of like mimicking another person, right? So it has all these different videos of, great speakers like Steve Jobs, right? At the Stanford commencement when he was speaking there. It would have snippets of it where it allows you to listen to how he speaks. And then it actually analyzes, its intonations and, where it needs to be focused. And then allows you to, after you listen to it, you try to pretend to be like him, right? So, as y'all know, sometimes learning or copying is like the best of form of flattery, right? Because, we do that a lot in terms of learning, right? So in this situation, it is actually, through that process of mimicking. And it's looking at, once you go through that process, not only, it's looking at some of the things that I've just mentioned before, right? Your intonation scores, your pronunciation scores, your fluency scores. Okay, from 0 to 100, right? Indicator. And then furthermore, it gives you these word by word areas for improvement, whether it be, for example, where you need to maybe stress in terms of, higher in pitch, volume and so forth, right? So this is more of learning from reference. And there's actually another option where once you have gone through this process, a couple times, then what you can do is you can actually bring in your own script, right? So this is where you can actually then bring in, let's say, your own class presentations that potentially either you have written yourself or you have maybe had ChatGPT help you create that, and then allow you to read it through yourself. And then furthermore, it would then be able to do the same type of analysis as well, looking at, areas where the delivery can be improved. Okay, so this is a tool. Okay, so this is a tool that we can definitely consider. Of course, this is, learning languages, not learning language, improving our language is always not something that happens overnight. So it has to be consistently, practice, I guess. And then the evaluation and feedback. So two more, and then we're gonna have a break, okay? And then after you guys come back, we'll do the sort of the hands-on. So the other two second one was the assessment, evaluation, and feedback, right? So this is something that I mentioned. We would need to think about how we can provide to our students in EMI setting timely evaluation and feedback. And so in this situation, the goal obviously is comprehension, right? Because you want to be able to provide the necessary feedback so that they can make the necessary adjustments, so they understand and then comprehend what you're trying to teach them, right? In terms of knowledge. And so the goal is to align with, let's say, your learning objectives, grading consistency, right? So most likely, I'm pretty sure we all have a rubric of how we, let's say, grade our students. But that's something that, but sometimes, I don't know if we can translate that into something more, systematic. But if you have something like this, you can actually utilize that with AI, which I'll show you on my next slide. How you can actually use, let's say, ChatGPT to help you evaluate students' assignments or even examinations. But in order for you to do that effectively, you would need to have a clear definition of what is good and what's not. And so that rubric is really important, right? If you don't have that, there's even tools, AI tools that can actually help you build out that rubric, which I didn't specify today. There's actually a lot of stuff I didn't actually specify today, but if it needs to, we can get into another session, right? But there are ways where you can actually use AI to help you build up your rubric. And then furthermore, the feedback, sometimes it's important on being specific, right? Because if you're being too general, students don't know how to act on that. So I'm going to use an example, okay? So this is an example. Like I said, I'm currently studying, mainly human-centered AI at Chien Lee University, and so I recently do a lot of these type of classes or courses, on AI, and so this was a class that I taught at Zhongnan Daxue in Kaohsiung, and I was teaching these business students on how to create prompts, prompt designs, and essentially for prompt designs for images. And so I was teaching them on, the prompt designs, essentially prompt engineering, right? And so what I did was I actually taught them. I said, hey, so this was an assignment where I asked you to create a prompt for a specific design for a social media post. And I had them based on, my lecture on some of the things that they needed to consider, right? For example, it needs to state the clear design styles. It needs to clearly state the parameters in terms of, like what's the subject matter and so forth, and also evaluate whether it's, in terms of lighting and so on, right? So all that stuff should be included in the prompt. And then furthermore, I told them that I would grade you, not from a personal perspective, but I'm going to have ChatGPT grade you, because the prompt designs that you are creating is actually not for me to read, it's actually for AI to read. So if they cannot understand what you're writing, then obviously we shouldn't get a good mark, right? So what I did was, so my prompt was this, you are tasked, so I tell ChatGPT and says, hey, okay, you are tasked with evaluating the following design prompts. Right, so I feed in all these different prompts from different students based on the given evaluation criteria. Out of a perfect score, boom, 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 boom. These are the criteria. Here's the prompt design 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right. So then, once I'm able to clearly specify my evaluation criteria, it can actually do a pretty good job, right? And then furthermore, on the left is actually an example that I used an AI tool to help me create a evaluation rubric based on that same assignment. And so AI was able to, once again, based on my criteria, the design style clarity, image parameters, lighting description, color palettes, and overall prompt quality, provide, a rubric of 5-point scale, and then providing, specific, criteria, right? So these are all things that, in order for us to assess and provide feedback, we actually need to understand what's the criteria first. And so a lot of us that are currently already teaching for a long time, making sure you guys have a set criteria or a set rubric. But if that's not stated, clearly on a structure like this, it would be difficult for us to be able to engage with AI to help us with this evaluation assessment. So this is what I call human and AI evaluation, right? And this is really awesome. Yeah, so I actually do this quite often. Not only to save me time, but I also want to show the students that, hey, since you're using AI, so I'm using AI as well, but let's use it, in a proactive way, in terms of helping the overall learning process. And so I actually use this process to teach them, like how AI is actually looking at your prompt, and how you can actually, create better prompts based on a clear set of, let's say, criteria. Okay, and then lastly is the virtual teaching assistant, right? And so this is, so this is one last thing before we do a short break. So the hands-on that I'm going to be teaching you guys after you come back, these are some of the things the objectives that hopefully this MyGPT can help you guys with. One obviously is learning support, right? So when students have learning, let's say, questions regarding, like a specific lecture or a topic, whatever, this can do this really well. Okay, it can actually answer it. I would say sometimes even better than the lecture itself. And then furthermore, the administrative support. For example, if you're able to provide your office hours, like I said, the schedule where ChatGPT can recognize that. If you provide your schedule to your MyChatGPT, it would know when you're available. And so when another student asks, hey, is Professor Gao available next Wednesday at 2 to 3 p.m., they can actually answer that question because they would then have your schedule and say, oh no, he's currently not available at that time, but he is available at 5 to 6 p.m. In fact, you can actually do that. So it can do administrative support, right? Whereas before, maybe you guys are going, email back and forth, whatever. And then even class promotions, right? And so this is quite interesting. So it's interesting how Professor Gao just mentioned about, in the first weekend, we're trying to, get students in our class, right? That's important, right? And so I'm going to show you an example when we come back, the hands-on, where I actually use the example of the class that I taught at Chulalongkorn about a month and a half ago, right? Where I actually did this. I mean, because I have, so this is a class I have, taken before and taught before, and I have feedbacks from students that, after in my class, I always have a questionnaire, right? So students always do their open-ended, I love this class, whatever, but, some of the positive stuff and even some negative stuff. And what I did was I even added my survey responses into my virtual GPT. And so when these students are about to come and take my class, they can actually ask and says, so one example would be, a student asks, hey, should I take this class? What were some of the feedbacks that students had? And my ChatGPT would help me promote my class and says, oh yeah, okay, based on the students that taken this class before, these are some positive, comments. And so definitely, you definitely don't want to miss out, Chien's class or whatever, right? So it's actually doing that class promotion as well. So, so I'm going to be showing you guys. So make sure you come back after the break, okay? So that will lead to, so this is the OpenAI. So the one I created was EMI workshop TA, AI use, my class was AI use case for business. Yeah, so that's something, if you're interested, I can share with the link that I can put around. Okay, so let's take a break. Okay, welcome back. Well, it's good to see. I think everyone got back. Okay, so we're gonna continue on this next step. And so originally I had, the one section about the privacy and constraints, but I've sort of made a swap. I want to show you guys this first, and then if we have additional time, we can go through that. Because I figured this is the reason why we're all here today, right? So I want to make sure that we get the important part out of the way first. Okay, so I call this, the how-to guide, right? So, like what Professor Gao was saying, I mean, this is sort of like Costco where you're doing the testing, food testing. We're not going to be able to go in, because I think there's 4 or 5 or tools here. So we're not going to be able to go through each and one of them, as detailed as we would like. But at least I was able to highlight some of the features and functions that, based on what I mentioned earlier with the automate, the enhance, as well as the support, at least it can actually get us start, the process. So, yeah. Okay. So once again, right? So this was our objective, and we're going to use this objective, again, to see what are some of the tools that can help us achieve these objectives, right? And so the automate, remember, we talked about, right? There's many things that can possibly go through this process of, let's say, getting it ready for the EMI ready setting, right? And so these are all some of the diverse materials that are currently in use. And so we're going to focus on these two, okay? Because like I said, we don't have all time to do all this, but like, for example, core syllabus, how we can use ChatGPT. For class presentation, how we can use mainly Deckflow, to be able to help us with translation, right? So this is one of the classes that I took last semester, right? This was obviously, based on my major, Renban AI team, like a human-centered AI, right? So, he's actually my advisor, and so this was the class syllabus, and then so what I did was I wanted to, have something to show you guys, and so this is something that what we usually have in terms of our class syllabus. And before I get into how we do this, I have to once again tell you guys how we can do it, a good prompt design. I mean, that is important, right? Sometimes we, for now, sometimes we just talk to AI, but talking is one thing, but creating a prompt design that actually systematic and structured, I think that's another thing. And so usually when I'm teaching about, prompt design, I always teach my students that, hey, you got to make sure you follow this structure. Mainly, having the context, and then being very clear on what's the task that you would want the AI to do. And then furthermore, so the task also includes your objective or your aims. And furthermore, laying out the instruction as clear as possible, whether it be, how you would like to have it to structure the content, whether it be even, for example, the number of words or characters that you would like it to be specified, right? And then furthermore, sometimes I almost treat, so ChatGPT is always open on my computer. So, and I sometimes, when I need someone to talk to, not everyone is always available to talk to me. And so ChatGPT has been a blessing because I get to have someone like that I can talk to. And then, however, when I want to talk to ChatGPT, I need to make sure I put it in the right context. So I need to okay, you are currently a colleague of mine that's, let's say, an engineer, right? So I need to craft that context, in terms of persona that he is or she is. And then the task, obviously, what I'm asking or the question that I'm trying to do, and then the instructions, and then furthermore, even the clarity too. It's just like when you're talking to an individual, you need to make sure that it understands everything that you have stated, right? And so that part is also important. And then furthermore, for example, the bias and limitation part of it, you'll see that I also sometimes specify that not only is this clear, but also potentially provide sources of more information. Okay, so that's important too, because for me sometimes I need to understand where this information that it is generating, where is it coming from, or is based on, and so forth. So to eliminate the potential for bias and as well as hallucination. And so with that, we can get into the exercise. And then so I've actually, like if you scan this QR code, you'll actually get this template. So what I did was, so here's that same structure that I followed here. Okay. But if I want ChatGPT to be able to translate my syllabus into English, what I would say is, okay, you are a professor teaching a class on the topic of whatever this class is. Okay. So I want to set, ChatGPT's persona. That's important because of the context. And then I provide, the task, which is, translate the attached course syllabus into English. And the goal, so I'm setting out the aim, the objective. The goal is to be able to use the syllabus in an EMI, just in case if it doesn't know what it is, English as a medium for instructional setting for educational teaching, right? So that's the context. And in terms of the instruction, what I would say is because, like with any subject, there's always specific terminologies that are used in that specific field. And so I want to make sure that they use topic-specific terminologies and language level. Keep in mind the language level that's suitable for, because I was teaching, let's say, MBA students, that's suitable for graduate level universities. However, non-native English speakers, right? That makes a difference, right? In the translated content. And so make sure to, and of course, also maintain the original format, right? So this was the instruction, this was the context, this was the task. And then, for clarity, I would say, hey, is this prompt instruction clear? And clear, please proceed. If not, please ask questions, right? But this is essentially what I usually teach my students in terms of how to craft, a usable or functional or effective prompt design. And so this is something that you can also try it out for yourself, right? Attach your current, let's say, Chinese syllabus, for CMI, use this prompt structure, use this template, just scan QR code, and it actually does a pretty good job, okay? And so this is what I use when I need to get it into, let's say, ready for econ. Any questions on this? Good? Yeah.
Have you ever get a question back from the ChatGPT or AI that asks you to clarify some of your problem?
To be honest, not really. This is something that I add just to, because, like ChatGPT, and that's why it hallucinates, right? Because it's always trying to satisfy your objective. So it will force itself to satisfy your objective a lot of times. But for me, I think sometimes I add this, to make sure that. So sometimes I even ask, the sources, like where do you, and please provide the necessary sources for your information. So that's also another clarity part of it, where sometimes I use this, which is important because sometimes you want to know what are some of the sources that it is relying on, for the content generation. But to answer your question, I don't usually get questions because that's not how ChatGPT works. But however, in terms of the resources, the references, and it is also suitable to be added up on, the vast component of the prompt.
Have you ever tried to use some like keyword like non-native English speakers or not in the language?
Yeah.
Obviously, city technology.
Yeah.
You remove that.
Yeah.
Create a difference.
Yeah. It does make it makes like, for example, I mean, this non-native English part, obviously, I think it's very clear that it does try to lower, or make the English a little bit easier to read. And so I think that is important, right? Because sometimes, because when we're teaching an EMI class, of course, we're going to have the foreign students, but we're also going to have Taiwanese students as well, right? The Taiwanese students, their English level may not be as good as the, let's say, American international students. So I think this is important, and so that's why sometimes we forget that, the English that's presented should be at a level that's suitable for non-native English students. And so to answer your question, yes, I think that is very visible when you ask them like this for this process. Okay. Any questions? No? Okay.
Yeah, and so this is how we just using this prompt and just put our class into it and put into ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And then they will just generate a syllabus for us, right?
Yeah. And then so another thing where we added this instruction was, to use topic specific, right? So it knows what's your topic, and then it specifically tries to hopefully use terminologies and vocabularies that are suitable for that industry. So okay. So that's syllabus. And then, okay, yeah, so this is what it created. Okay, so the Chinese was this. And then it created, similar, layout fashion, which of course description artificial intelligence is becoming an integral part of the world around, algorithmic decision making and so forth. So yeah, so it does a pretty good job. Okay. But of course, I never recommend just to use it as it is because there's always potential risk to that. So I think it's always good to go back and, read it a couple more times and then if necessary, make the necessary changes. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Presentation. So the presentations is this tool. It's called Deckflow. Okay. How many of you heard of Deckflow? Never, right? Oh, you heard of it. I told you. Okay. So this is a tool that is quite interesting because translation. There's Google Translate. Translation. To be honest, I think language-wise, it's not. With AI now, language is not a big barrier. But why do I specifically point this out is because when we are translating PowerPoint, there's a tricky part to this because PowerPoint it has multiple elements, right? There are graphs, there's diagrams, and so forth. And then sometimes the text are actually on the images itself, and so. If you really think about it, I mean, you can still manually do this, where you're manually pulling the text and then you're feeding it into Google Translate or whatever, or maybe even ChatGPT, and then having it translate all the necessary terminologies and text, all that stuff. And then you need to have, let's say, you or your teacher, your teaching assistant, go back and relay it out, right? Right? Because there's still that layout. Because ultimately, the presentation of it is there's a visual. Now that's the tricky part because that could be somewhat time consuming. So what this program actually does, it is actually preserving your original format. So when it's translating it, the image is still there, but what it does is it actually replaces the words. Let's say there was in Chinese, then he'll get into whatever language you need, right? So there's multiple choices on it, like French, German, all that stuff. But we're talking about English, so mainly it's in English. And so, so this is something called Deckflow. And then, so the subscription model for this is quite interesting. Before, it was actually a subscription model based on, like month usage. But now, I think recently they changed it to a credit base, which actually I think it's more beneficial for us. Let's say if, like what Professor Gao was saying, if you guys do get into, is interested in that, subsidy, then it's actually pay per use in the sense of if you need, let's say, 100,000 words, like if you have 10 presentations, it actually gets back to sort of like calculating by words and essentially by tokens. So it's actually more beneficial. So it's more cost effective versus, let's say, if you're doing it in the past where it was doing by months, it might not be as effective. And so in this situation, what I used was, because my PowerPoint, as you can see, there's not many words, so I couldn't use my PowerPoint to do this because it wouldn't be able to represent what are some of the slides that we see here currently, right? So I went online, I found, I'm pretty sure a lot of our slides, some of our slides might look like this, right? There's images, there's diagrams, and there's like Chinese words all over it, right? And then with pictures and then all that stuff, right? So these are all things, if we were to translate that, like I said, we need to have some efforts in terms of like translating and then laying it out. But with Deckflow, it's actually quite easy because not only does it detect the language, or you can select it, you upload your file, and you got your target language. The target language, there's English, Japanese, whatever, right? And then you just upload your file, and what it does is it actually and furthermore, like I said, it's actually using, so it is not just purely a translation, it is actually tapping into, LLMs as well, right? So it's actually, for it to do the translation, it is also using, let's say, for maybe, to be able to take into, the necessary content and then do the necessary translation. So it is not just doing the human translation, but also, evaluating the context. And then so it translates it, and what happens is, there's still some layout that needs to be done. Because, like I said, when we're translating, because there's a load, of Chinese and compared to English sometimes. English is definitely a lot longer. This is character based, and so when you get a situation where all the words are potentially correctly translated, but then it may not, even though before it wasn't the best looking slide, now it probably looks a little bit even worse, and so there still probably needs some fine tuning that needs to be done. But at least, the effort it's a little bit easier in the sense of it's trying to maintain and preserve the original format, right? So that's something that I just something that just to keep in mind. With this tool, not only does it preserve the format, but it actually taps into not just to the traditional annotation, but it's also tapping into LLMs. Using AI to give you more appropriate translations. Okay. And then furthermore, they have like and if you're doing this for a whole entire class or course, or even series of classes that you teach in the subject, then the glossary will play an important role, right? Because there potentially might be specific vocabularies that is specifically targeted to your subject that maybe even LLMs or AI doesn't do the job of it. And so this is where potentially this would be something where we can be able to import and then be able to maintain, and then furthermore use down the road. So you can actually maintain your vocabulary and then so it will do the job of translation down the road. So let's say if you were to change one of them, and then in the future it will be able to understand that specific terminology and then use it. Okay, so to some extent, you're training your own, let's say, translation to some extent, from a very fundamental perspective, obviously. And then, like I said, I think the cost of it is relatively, I think it's better than the original subscription model because, like I said, it's just pay as you go. You're translating words and then, vice versa. Okay, so that was the automation part. So your syllabus, your slides, after today's talk, I guess there's no more excuses, right? In the past, maybe you would say, I don't want to do EMI because I just don't have time to translate my slides, and here's a solution. Now let's look at the enhancement part. The enhancement part is, like I said before, right? It's really enhancing the class activities. Okay, you have a question? Sorry.
Hello, if I use the image file, for example, I just cut and paste from screen. Words here. Is that going to recognize that?
That is a very good question. Because that's different than, let's say, if you were to type a word, right? Because if you were to type a word, there is essentially text. Right.
Just use PowerPoint tool and just I just copy and paste from the screen, and there are text on the screen.
Okay.
So,
that's a
recognize that?
good question. Let me, because I don't want to answer this wrong. Let me get back to you on this. But I know for sure if you were to type it will be able to translate for sure. But you're right.
Another tool, you cannot recognize the content frame from the screen. But if I just use then it's not.
Okay. That's a good question. Let me test this and we'll get back to you. Okay, on that question. I don't want to miss the okay, but that's a good question. Okay. So the enhanced part is essentially, like I said before, right? How can we design activities specifically for EMI settings? And specifically, we're looking at DOKs, the depth of knowledge, right? How can we design these tasks or assignments to encourage not only just the fundamental of recall and reproduce, but also maybe even encourage like strategic thinking and do the long-term extended strategic thinking. So and when we look at these different DOKs, recall, reproduce, they all have based on normal web, there are different activities that can be undertaken to be able to achieve each of these levels. If you guys have studied this in education. So for example, like recall and reduce, it's really having the students to really, based on the knowledge that you have imparted, develop a concept map, right? And so forth, or a timeline to allow them to really think about or to recall the information that you shared, right? So this essentially is trying to reproduce that information, the skills where you would then start asking them, to do role plays or to to design a model that will utilize some of the skills that they've learned and concepts and so forth. The strategic thinking part, it goes up a little bit further, right? It's asking it to do, let's say, Venn diagrams to compare and analyze what are the commonalities or differences. So that needs a little bit more strategic thinking. And the extended strategic thinking essentially is when you're having it to analyze, let's say, in a different format, let's say maybe a case study, and then allowing it to have not only just like one answer, but multiple, let's say, strategic answers and so forth. So those are all things that you're encouraging more of the higher order thinking. And so, like I said before, right, these students, these foreign students, let's say, for example, that are here, that are taking EMI classes, they have different backgrounds, they potentially, gone through with different cultures and education. So for us to undertake this EMI process is not just delivering it in another language, but also really think about potentially redesigning, let's say, our class activities. And so one of the things that, that it's easy to achieve, there are tools like, for example, templates, right? Which I'm pretty sure some of you are already used to in your class already, but for something like this, it would have like different organizer templates, for, let's say, flow charts and, story maps, Venn diagrams. These are all things that templates are already available that you can actually use, pass it to your class, and then have them based on your lecture today. Let's do a necessary, let's say, recall or remembering, right? So these are all things that are pretty common. Even let's say Canva, like if you guys use Canva, if you just type in graphic organizers, there's a lot of these things that can encourage them to start thinking about, some of the, the DOK, recall and remember, right? But I'm pretty sure this is not what you're here to listen to me talk about. So what you're really thinking about is this, okay? These are the two tools that you should probably consider. How many of you have heard of Manager School or Brisk Teaching? No? Except, see why. I know he has, because I always share with him, these newfound knowledge. But anyway, good. So these are two tools that you can use. Manager School, if you were to, this is essentially, using it based on your current existing class material. So if you have, let's say, slides or, documents, whatever, you can then essentially go in here. There's a specific function that actually helps you create DOKs, okay? Depth of knowledge, right? So what you do is you go in here, you select the specific function of DOK, and like I said, this application is based on the materials that you currently have. So whether it be your course material, your presentation, whatever, you can actually upload that, refine the grade level, and then provide, for example, the specific topic, your objectives and so forth. It can actually, based on this information, do a pretty good job of creating the DOKs, the depth of knowledge for these 4 different levels. So let's say we select university, it will then create, right? So for example, DOK level 1, which it also knows is for recall and measure, it would say, okay, what you can do is have, so the example that I'm using is for the Thailand, Shillong class that I did, have your class do a generative AI and a primary function, defining, defining is a recall, right? Whereas let's say for skills and concept level 2, instead of just having them recall, let's have them compare, let's say, the before and after process, right? That requires a little bit more of, thinking and classifying. And then furthermore, for the strategic thinking, you can say, okay, well, let's investigate. Okay, let's investigate how, let's say when I was teaching them about AI, how does that align to, because I was teaching MBA students, right? How does that align to business goals? So you're essentially, based on what you taught them, having them to really think about some of the sort of higher order thinking in terms of drawing conclusions or making assessments and investigation. And lastly, obviously, is the DOK level 4. It's really applying some of these concepts that you taught them, right? So So then in this situation, it's saying, okay, analyze, like I said before, case studies that don't have specific answers, but allow them to apply what they've learned in a different, let's say, format and so forth. So this is actually something that it can actually generate for you based on your lecture material. So let's say you have your lecture material for today, for let's say next week, and if you want to start thinking about the depth of knowledge, you can use this tool. Upload, let's say, your lecture material and have it provide suggestions where you can actually encourage students to not only just to think about and recall and remember, but actually encourage them to really apply what you have taught them, right? So this is a perfect tool if you don't have, like, let's say, the educational pedagogy background. It actually help you think about some of this stuff. And then, so that was based on the materials that you had, right? But keep in mind, now we're in internet age, so we always have a lot of additional information. So, for example, I sometimes like to incorporate a reading from a specific article that potentially is not from my lecture, but it's probably from a specific news, right? So that's something that can be applied as well. So if the material or the source is not from your lecture, it's actually coming from an outside material, Brisk is perfect because what it does is it's actually Chrome add-on. So in this situation, let's say my topic was how to the generative AI uses across industries. This was a report that was written by a reputable, let's say, source. Then if this is something that I want my students to read, after they read it, then I want to have some exercises for them to do. So what happens is, with Brisk, it's a Chrome where I install. So when I see a content that I'm about to use, then what I can do is I can then apply or activate this Chrome. It pops up. It gives you, once again, these different functionalities. And as you can see, DOK is once again there as well. And so what I can do is I don't even need to do the import and everything because it's already on the page. So it can actually just on this page activate this Chrome add-on. And then based on the feature that I said, okay, create the DOK questions, right, for the levels and so forth. It would then, so it actually integrates with Google Suite, so Doc and Suite, Sheets and everything. It actually outputs exactly those DOK, like I mentioned before, 1, 2, 3, 4, into a Google Doc, right? So based on that piece of article that I have identified and I would like my students to read, it would then be able to create various questions and activities for your student to be able to engage in that discussion. And what is that? Right. So the Magic School is based on the material, your own material. Let's say your presentations and slides, whatever. Brisk is actually for external materials, whether it be article. It can even be, sometimes I have my students, watching YouTube video because people like to watch videos now. Like kids like to watch video. Same thing. Go on that video, that YouTube video. Activate, the Brisk. And then you can actually, based on this video, create a DOK. And it gives you questions and activities. Right? It's easy as that. So you don't even need to, how can I download this video? How can I upload this video? How can, because if you're doing this on ChatGPT can do it. I'm pretty sure ChatGPT can do everything. But if you were to do this on ChatGPT, you would have the process of you need to copy and paste and upload and all this stuff. This is all on that web page. It does it, and then it exports it onto the Google Sheet or Doc, and then you have the file. Okay, understand? So we get the translated information, like we said, the automation. The enhancement is this is where, so this is for enhancement, right? So this is helping you to better engage with your students. And then the last thing is the support, right? The support, obviously, is, everyone is excited about this, right? Okay, so so the support part, there's 3 components. We don't have time, so I'm just going to talk you through about the MyGPT. Okay, the MyGPT essentially is using OpenAI. Okay, so this is how many of you are using ChatGPT Plus? Yeah. See why? So we need to get them on plus because they need plus. You need to create it with plus, but once you create it with plus, people that don't have plus can use your virtual GDP as well. So the user doesn't need to be on plus, the creator needs to be on plus, right? That's the difference. Okay, so I'm going to use my case study. So for example, like I said, I was teaching the MBA class at Chien Lee, and then so this was a class that's about 60-70 students, MBA students, and then they're non-engineering backgrounds, right? So I was trying to teach non-engineering background students about AI and its application in business through various use cases, and then so they're non-native English speakers, non-English student, engineering students, sort of about 64, second year MBA program. So they need to be able to learn these skills so they can apply it to the workforce when they graduate and so on. Okay, so what I did was, so I, so in OpenAI, where I can actually create my own GPT, right? And then when I come in here, ask me, it tries to do this very user-friendly, right? So it asks you, hey, what would you like to make? Right? And then so I tell them, hey, I want to build a virtual teaching assistant for my EMI class titled Empowering Tomorrow's Leaders, Business Transformation Powered by AI, that focus on the topic of generative AI and use cases. This is cool, right? When I tell it what it does, it says, wow, okay, now let me give you some virtual teaching names. It even creates a name for you. So it says, okay, well, can we use this? And so I said, how about we use the name of AI Business Mentor? And I didn't like that, so I changed that because it wasn't as clear. So I said, oh, no, please change it to this. So I changed it. And then because we need to create an avatar. So based on what I told it, it would then create an avatar for me. It says, okay, can we use this avatar for your chat? I said, well, yeah, sure, that's fine. So I just used it. Okay, so it walks you through this process, okay? Walks you through this process. And then so I tell it the profile was, the picture looks good, let's go. So I'm talking to a robot that's helping me to do this, okay? It's not like I'm programming this. It's like a walk through process. And then I tell it, okay, here's my presentation. And these are some things that I would like it to do. The virtual teaching assistant should provide the following support. Learn about the instructor's background. So, just in case a student wants to learn about my background, it would then be able to explain my background, help clarify workshop outlines, provide objectives, the evaluation slides, provide reasoning, explanation, help answer lecture-related questions, help answer, related questions about activities and so forth. So these are things that I expect this virtual assistant can help me with, right? So then once I do that, now it's fully equipped. Okay, so then and then so the setting page, you go in and you can add additional information in there. So it has like diagrams, it has Word files and everything. Okay, so once I add there, boom. And it says, okay, share. How can I share? So I can share, with a link. Okay, so once I have a link, then I can share with my students. And it says, okay, if you have any questions, you can ask my virtual TA first. And then if that doesn't help, then come find me. And then so it gives you a link, and then so like I said, the user can do that. And let me show you some of the questions that you can answer. It's amazing, right? So let's say the student asks, hey, I'm a little confused about the workshop activity number 2. Can you help me explain the objective? So it would say, okay, the objective is this, the activity steps is this, and then the key takeaways. It gives you the student key takeaways. So it knows what's the purpose of the activity number 2. So it's helping me to better, instruct my students on how to undertake, the activity. Okay, and then so let's say the students interested in what they will be learning about the workshop. They will tell you the workshop focus, the key objectives, and so on. Yeah, so keep in mind, some of this information I've already either it's in my presentation or I've added in some sort of document, so it has that information to be answered on my behalf, right? And then if someone asks, okay, so what is Chien's educational background? It will say, okay, Chien's educational background includes, currently doing a PhD program at National University, so forth, right? So it answers my background information just in case the student is interested in who I am. And then furthermore, look at this, okay. I'm evaluating whether I should take this course. What is Chien's presentation style? right? Now, sometimes students, they like specific professors with specific style, right? It can actually answer this question as well. Chien's presentation style is a mix of teaching, evaluation, and interactive analysis, designed to keep participants engaged and actively involved. This approach includes teach, work content, evaluate, lesson design, and analyze students' engagement and feedback. So it's actually, helping me to explain what my style is. And then lastly, like I said, I actually fed some of the questionnaire responses from the previous students. So if a student is evaluating whether he or she should take my class, it would say, ask, okay, what are some of the feedback from students that have taken this class before? I would like to evaluate them before deciding to take this workshop. And so my virtual teaching assistant will say, okay, feedback. Okay, it actually quantifies it, statistically, because when I do my responses questionnaire, I use Likert scale, right? 1 to 5, whatever. It gives overall satisfaction is this, whatever, effectiveness is that. Open-ended, hey, so these are some of all the positive ones. Hey, I like the workshop, how it was interactive rather than just a lecture. Key takeaways from student reviews. This is all generated based on my virtual teaching system. So it is, to some extent, it's trying to help me recruit students to some extent. It understands me and my virtual assistant is aligned in terms of objective, right? It's trying to promote my teaching style. It's trying to promote, the past, let's say, feedbacks from students and so forth. So this is actually not bad, right? As long as you provide the necessary information. So the information, of course, if we were to do this, for your subsidiary, we would then need to do like a, sort of a data idea. Yeah. We need to analyze what data you have or what, let's say, information that you have, so we can feed it here. So to be able to represent people. Okay. So that's pretty much it. And I think our time is pretty much up. Yeah. And I don't want to take too much of your time, but like I said, just one last minute, I just want to quickly share. So today, beside me, my other teammate Ken is also here as well. So we are actually working on an awesome, tool ourselves, because we're users of tools. So as users, we also want to be creators of tools, right? So we recently created this tool called ReadSphere, which is essentially another tool to help improve, or to some extent, reimagine the reading experience. And so as EMI, some of the pain points that we often engage, right? So for example, when we are doing EMI classes, sometimes we forget about our local Taiwanese students as well, right? Because keep in mind, when we're doing EMI classes, there's also Taiwanese students that are still going to be around. And so because we are in that EMI setting, sometimes we have situations where we have falling behind in such a comprehension, because their English level is not as good as, let's say, their classmates. So that's one of the pain points that EMI sometimes people serve. And, just like I showed you before, right? Today we went through 4 or 5 AI tools. Right now, the tools are very fragmented, right? It's everywhere for different purposes, on demand and subscription and all that stuff. So is there one, all in one solution? And how can we, so some of the things that I just showed you, those are all more of a tool. You can't really have performances. You can't really gauge on how useful that was from a performance perspective. And so that's why we created this tool, ReadSphere, which essentially helps with some of these processes. For example, with Taiwanese students, now that they're in that immersive English environment, how can we make sure that the comprehension level keeps up, right? So we personalize the reading experience. In terms of fragmented, we integrated all this stuff in terms of content generation, the assessment, and so forth. And so currently right now we're actually working with a public university in Taiwan. It's essentially a foreign language department, and furthermore, helping that class, to utilize, tool like ReadSphere to be able to allow the students not only to be able to understand some of the Western, let's say, literature classics, because everyone's English level is different, but more importantly, to be able to have a process where we can, based on their reading grade level, to adjust their lessons, their assessments, and so forth. And lastly, I think we really need to think about this, right? When we're teaching classes now, we really need to think about not only just EMI classes, CMI classes as well. How can we incorporate the AI process into learning? Because like what Professor Gao was saying, right? In the very near future, getting the perfect answer is no longer the objective, because with ChatGPT, the perfect answer is always available. And in fact, down the road, it's really about how to be able to justify your answer. Really understanding the process of reaching to that answer is what makes that learning so critical. And so that's why the DOK is so important, right? Because we're not just asking them to remember and recall, because remember and recall is to make sure that they can score a high score on the test. But that no longer is, the objective, because ChatGPT can remember better than anyone. It's really about how, to activate their critical thinking. How do they activate, let's say, the higher order of, let's say, the strategic knowledge. That is the key component to learning down the road. So I have a question here. If I can share you the video, you can see how we actually go about doing this. I was going to play this, but we don't have time. But anyway, so that's pretty much it. If you're interested in getting my PowerPoint, please also give me some feedback on today's presentation. I'd love to hear on how we can improve on this. And then, of course, I will then also send you the presentation for your reference as well. Okay, thank you.